The male lead, Lam Thuafong, is a cold and quiet person, the typical CEO type, but often ends up in accidental touches. The female lead, Trinh Hai, is a cute person, often shy, stubborn in speech, but soft-hearted. Under the cherry blossom tree, Hai was stepping back little by little, flustered. She softly told him to stand a bit farther away from her, but Thuafong didn't say anything. He simply lowered his head silently. Gently lifting her chin with one hand, in a low voice, he asked if she was avoiding him. Hai's face flushed red as she protested that she wasn't avoiding him at all. But in truth, she was secretly praying for her heart to calm down, because if it kept pounding like this, she might faint. Before she could say anything more, he suddenly lowered his head and kissed her. Hai only managed to let out her eyes widened in shock. Her hands unconsciously clutched onto his shirt. Time passed. 5 seconds, then 10 seconds went by. He let her go, looked at her, smiled lightly and said, "Quiet now." Hai secretly thought in her heart, "Quiet my foot." But why does she not hate it at all? That night, Hai fell asleep on his shoulder. Thuafong gently stroked her head. His voice softened as he said, "Silly girl. Do you know that you are walking right into a trap?" she murmured in her sleep. "Don't be so harsh to me." He paused for a moment, then smiled lightly and promised, "All right, I won't be harsh anymore, only to you." And just like that, the cold CEO officially fell because of a girl. The female lead's best friend asked, "So how did you end up getting kissed?" Hai replied awkwardly, "I don't know either." He suddenly came closer. Her friend pressed further. "Then what did you do?" Hai admitted, "I just stood still." Her friend could only give a speechless look and concluded, "So you were basically willing then." The next day, Hai deliberately avoided Thuafong, but as soon as she stepped into the company, the first thing she saw was a beautiful girl standing very close to him. The girl gently asked Thuafong, "Are you free tonight?" Hai froze for a moment, thinking to herself, "Well, what does that have to do with me anyway?" She turned to leave but was suddenly pulled back. Thuafong held her wrist tightly, his cold voice asking, "Where are you going?" Hai replied irritably, "None of your business." He curled his lips teasingly. "Then why does your face look so unpleasant?" Leaving her silently cursing in her heart, "Damn it, I've been seen right through." In the afternoon, that girl still persistently clung to Thuafong and acted coquettishly, saying that he hadn't introduced her to everyone yet. But before she could finish her sentence, Thuafong decisively pulled Hai over and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, making the entire office freeze instantly. He looked around at everyone and firmly announced, "Let me introduce her. This is my girlfriend." This action completely shocked Hai, her thoughts running wildly in her head. "Since when did I become his girlfriend?" Meanwhile, the other girl's face turned pale as she blurted out, "Are you joking?" And Thuafong coldly replied, "I don't have the habit of joking." After work, Hai pulled him outside and angrily asked, "Who allowed you to say such nonsense?" Thuafong remained very calm and asked back, "Isn't it true?" She firmly replied, "Of course not." At that moment, he stepped closer and pressed her against the wall, then asked, "Then what was that kiss yesterday?" Leaving her speechless as she could only stammer in defense, "It was an accident." He smiled lightly and teased, "Then let's do it again to make it clear." Before Hai could finish her sentence, he lowered his head and kissed her once more, but this time she didn't push him away. Deep down, she understood that she had officially fallen into the CEO's trap. The next day, rumors about Hai being the CEO's girlfriend spread throughout the company. Before she could handle it, the girl from yesterday stepped forward and coldly smiled as she asked, "Do you think you're worthy?" Hai could only stay silent while the supporting female leaned close to her and mocked, "He's just playing around." This made doubts begin to rise in the female lead's heart. Wondering whether those words were true or not, the tension began to escalate. Hai's emotions were starting to waver. That evening, Wook-hai accidentally saw Thuo-fong going into a hotel with that girl, causing her heart to sink instantly. She bitterly murmured, "So that's how it is," then turned around and walked away in disappointment. At that moment, her mind kept circling with the thought that she was just a joke in his eyes. That scene was like a bucket of cold water poured over Wook-hai's feelings. The next morning, Wook-hai decided to submit her resignation, making Thuo-fong coldly ask what the reason was. She only replied indifferently that she felt tired. He stared at her and pressed further. "Are you deliberately avoiding me?" She just gave a faint, distant smile and said that she wouldn't dare to do that. This was the first time in his life that Thuo-fong felt everything was completely out of his control. Wook-hai's silence was truly the most painful response for Thuo-fong. The next morning, Wook-hai went to work with an extremely heavy mood. Suddenly, the supporting female appeared in front of her desk and gave a cold, mocking smile as she asked if she thought he only liked her. This woman really was like a lingering ghost, always waiting for a chance to attack Wook-hai. Wook-hai chose to remain silent even though her heart was pounding with anxiety. At that moment, her phone vibrated with a message from Thuo-fong asking her to come to his office immediately, making Wook-hai, despite her hesitation, still decide to walk forward to face everything. In the office, Thuo-fong stood there with a serious expression and directly asked if she was deliberately avoiding him. Wook-hai nervously stammered and denied it, saying it was just because she was busy with work. He slowly stepped closer and, in a deep, magnetic voice, affirmed that just by looking into her eyes he knew she was angry and who it was because of. Wook-hai couldn't hold back and blushed as she softly admitted that it was all because of that woman. At that moment he slightly frowned, then gently held her hand and sincerely told her not to ever let such small misunderstandings ruin their relationship. Thuo-fong's sincerity was truly the ultimate weapon that made Wook-hai unable to stay angry any longer. In the afternoon, on the company rooftop, the two of them stood quietly together watching the brilliant sunset. Thuo-fong gently pulled Wook-hai into his arms and softly said that from now on he would make her clearly understand that she belonged to him. Wook-hai smiled gently, leaned her head on his shoulder, and softly acted spoiled as she said, "Then from now on don't be angry with me anymore." He smiled lightly, placed a kiss on her forehead and promised that he wouldn't be angry anymore, but would only hold her tightly by his side, officially closing all misunderstandings with a sweet ending as both of them had fallen into each other's trap of love. In the afternoon, Wook-hai froze when she heard employees whispering about President Lim once having a fiancé. The name Vendeep being mentioned made her heart suddenly skip a beat as if being tightly squeezed. She stood motionless in the quiet hallway with her legs weak and unable to move forward, her mind filled only with shock and a bitter question about her true place in his heart. Wook-hai went to meet Vendeep to ask about the relationship between the two of them. Vendeep gave a faint smile and replied that she was the one who had almost married him, then stepped closer and whispered that Wook-hai was just a substitute. Wook-hai clenched her hands in pain but didn't want to lose, so she took a deep breath and looked straight at her, firmly stating that no matter what the past was, he had chosen her in the present, making Vendeep pause for a moment. That night, Wook-hai stood in front of Thuo-fong and asked about him having had a fiancé. He stayed silent for a few seconds before admitting it. Making the atmosphere freeze, Thuo-fong affirmed that it was only the past, then stepped closer and tightly held her hand. He looked straight into Wook-hai's eyes and declared that the person he wanted to keep now was her. Wook-hai looked at him with slightly reddened eyes full of doubt and asked if it was true. Thuo-fong immediately pulled her into his arms and whispered that if it wasn't true, he wouldn't be so afraid of losing her. That action officially revealed the weakness of the cold man in front of the woman he loved. At noon, Wook-hai was talking with a male colleague. She smiled lightly and said thank you. From a distance, Thuo-fong stopped, his gaze turning cold. He walked over and pulled her close to him. Got too much free time. Wook-hai was startled and asked, "What are you doing?" He lowered his head and said in a deep voice, "Are you that happy smiling at someone else?" Wook-hai secretly thought, wait, who is the one being jealous now? Mokai stared blankly at the face that was suddenly so close to hers. She could feel Thuafong's warm breath brushing against her forehead along with the strength of his arm tightening around her waist, making her heart skip a beat. So this man who always appeared calm and arrogant also had moments where he revealed such intense possessiveness without even trying to hide it. The coldness in his eyes at this moment was not dislike, but clearly jealousy overflowing right there in the office. She secretly thought that usually she was always the one chasing after him and fearing to lose him, but seeing the way he was openly asserting his claims so domineeringly in front of that male colleague, she realized that she herself also had quite an influence. A sweet feeling quietly crept into her mind, making her not only no longer feel afraid, but even want to tease him a little more to see just how far this cold CEO's jealousy would go. That afternoon, the whole company was in an uproar. Thuafong publicly said that Mokai was his. Everyone was stunned. Last time he said she was his girlfriend. They thought it was just a new relationship, but unexpectedly he announced it like this. Mokai blushed and retorted, "Who belongs to you?" He curled his lips and asked back, "Isn't it so?" She awkwardly replied no. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Then tonight I'll check again." Mokai could only fall silent and think to herself, "I'm doomed." At night, Mokai sat alone, her heart still beating fast, wondering what was wrong with her. Suddenly the door opened. Thuafong walked in without saying anything and hugged her from behind, then told her not to avoid him anymore. She softly said, "I'm not avoiding you." He rested his chin and asked, "Then why do I feel like you're getting distant?" Mokai stayed silent for a moment before turning around to hug him and confessed, "Because I'm scared." He gently tightened his arms and asked what she was afraid of. She replied that she was afraid of liking him. She made the male lead completely fall. The next morning, explosive news shook the entire Lamb Corporation about an unprecedented major crisis, pushing the atmosphere to extreme tension. Mokai, stunned, ran everywhere searching for Thuafong, her heart pounding nonstop with fear. When she pushed open the meeting room door, she saw him standing there amid piles of scattered documents, his gaze cold as ice, an icy chill radiating from him and enveloping the entire space. She trembled as she stepped closer and softly asked, "What's going on?" But Thuafong didn't even look back, only dropping a brief, distant line, "Don't interfere." That sentence cut into Mokai's heart like a knife, leaving her rooted to the spot with a bitter tightness in her chest, because it was the first time he had coldly pushed her away from his world. That night, Mokai was stunned into silence when she received a message. "We should stop." It was brief yet cruel, shattering her heart into pieces. She ran frantically through the dark to find him, demanding a clear explanation of what he meant. Thuafong stood with his back to her, his figure lonely and cold, then replied in a hoarse voice, "If you stay by my side right now, you'll be in danger." Mokai could no longer hold back her tears and cried out, "I'm not afraid of anything." Thuafong's hands clenched so tightly they trembled, yet he remained resolute, refusing to turn back, only uttering a line filled with pain. "I am, for the first time." That proud man chose to push the woman he loved away, just to protect her from the storms gathering ahead. Under the pouring rain, Mokai stood frozen at the company gate, her tears mingling with the icy raindrops, soaking her to the bone and leaving her trembling. Choking back her sobs, she forced out one final question. "So you really want to end everything?" Meanwhile, Thuafong stood there like a lifeless stone statue. After a few seconds of frightening silence, he gave only a single word, "Yes," cruel as a razor-sharp blade that severed her last remaining hope. Her heart tightened in pain. Mokai gave a faint, bitter smile and said, "Fine," before resolutely turning her back and walking into the blinding rain without looking back. This time, he did not run after her to grab her hand as he always did. But behind her, Thuafong's hand was clenched so tightly it trembled violently, his heart screaming in agony at the overwhelming loss of having to push away the woman he loved most with his own hands. After that fateful rainy day, Mokai resolutely submitted her resignation in an eerie silence. Not a single person stepped forward to ask her to stay, not even a polite word of concern. Before truly leaving, she stood quietly at the company gate for a long time, her eyes filled with sorrow, looking up at the top floor where his office was always lit, yet now seemed unbearably distant. Her lips trembled slightly as she choked out the words, "Goodbye." It was like a final severing of the last lingering ties to the man she had once loved so deeply. Just a few days later, Wook Hai quietly carried her suitcase onto a plane, leaving this country behind in search of a completely unfamiliar horizon. She departed without leaving a single message, without once looking back. A once passionate love had now become nothing more than shattered fragments of memory drifting into the void. A Midland corporation sinking deeper into an unprecedented economic crisis, with everything descending into chaos, Thua Phong alone silently bore all the pressure on his shoulders. Night after night, the lights in the CEO's office burned through till dawn, shining brightly in the lonely building, while the employees only dared to whisper among themselves that President Lam had lately become far more frightening and ruthless than before. His face grew increasingly indifferent, its features cold and emotionless, and his habit of speaking less became almost extreme, making everyone shudder with fear whenever they faced him. Yet at times, in moments of utter exhaustion, he would unconsciously glance toward the empty seat where Wook Hai used to sit, then suddenly freeze mid-motion, his heart tightening with a suffocating ache. A fleeting daze flickered in his eyes. He realized that the void she had left in this room and in his heart had become an abyss that nothing could ever fill. In a foreign land, Wook Hai quietly began her new life. Her smiles became brighter than ever. As if to conceal a bitter truth, she tried hard to forget the painful past. Yet every night, when darkness enveloped the room, she would unconsciously reach for the familiar phone, only to set it down again in a daze with a weary sigh. Because since that fateful rainy day, she had not received a single message from the man she once loved so deeply. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Thua Phong stood alone before the floor-to-ceiling window, his indifferent gaze cast down upon the bustling flow of traffic below. Although the city remained unusually vibrant and bustling, to him it had become utterly empty. Two people breathing under the same sky, looking in the same direction, yet suddenly their worlds no longer had any point of intersection. 3 years later, at a grand and prestigious banquet gathering the elite of the business world, a name was suddenly announced by the host as the newly returned creative director from abroad. At that moment, the grand doors of the hall swung open, and Wook Hai stepped in, wearing a magnificent evening gown, her long hair flowing in soft waves and her gaze strikingly calm. Her aura had completely changed from the timid girl she once was. The entire hall buzzed with whispers at her unexpected appearance. From a distance, Thua Phong stood frozen like a stone statue as he saw the woman he had once loved so deeply standing right before his eyes. Their gazes met in midair, yet neither of them said a word. And still, it felt as though the air around them had completely stilled in that moment. Old memories came flooding back like a slow, painfully unfolding film. In the stifling meeting room, where the tension was stretched to its limit, Wook Hai sat across from Thua Phong. She gave a perfectly polite, professional smile and spoke, "Hello, President Lam. It's been a long time." Her tone strangely calm, as if there had never been a deeply etched love between them. Thua Phong fell silent, staring into her indifferent eyes, his heart tightening at the distance between them, and could only respond in a low voice, "Amib, it has been a long time." Right after that, she lowered her head and focused intently on flipping through the documents, never once lifting her eyes to look at him again. She kept telling herself to stay calm and not allow any weakness in front of this man. Across from her, Thua Phong silently clenched his hand beneath the table, pain engulfing his mind as he wondered, how can you act as if nothing ever happened after all these years apart? The meeting ended in an atmosphere so stifling it was suffocating. Wook Hai resolutely stood up and quickly walked out of the room, trying to escape Thua Phong's tormenting gaze. But just as she reached the deserted hallway, a large, cold hand from behind seized her wrist and yanked her back, causing her to stagger, nearly falling into the firm chest of that man. Thuafong gripped her hand with terrifying force, as if afraid the slightest loosening would make her disappear forever. He growled through clenched teeth, "How long are you going to pretend you don't know me, Nguo Kai?" She coldly turned back, facing his face twisted with pain, and replied with biting sarcasm, "It seems we've never known each other at all." Those words struck like a knife straight through his heart, leaving him silent for a few seconds before his anger erupted to its peak. He pulled her even closer into his arms and growled, "I absolutely won't allow you to forget our past." Mukai furrowed her delicate brows and asked coldly, "And what right do you have to control my life now?" Thuafong looked straight into her indifferent eyes and spoke in a hoarse, pain-filled voice. "For the past 3 years, I have never let go of this love from my heart." Those words signaled the beginning of a new storm-filled chapter of Fated, a starred love beginning once again. The next morning, just as Wokai stepped out of the company building's lobby, a familiar luxury car quietly pulled up and stopped right in front of her, causing her to pause. The car door opened, and Thuafong stepped out, his posture proud, his gaze deep and imposing as he issued a brief command, "Get in the car." Mukai frowned slightly, showing her displeasure, and coldly replied, "I don't have time to get entangled with you anymore," before resolutely turning her back and quickly walking away. But in the very next instant, her wrist was seized tightly by a large, firm hand, leaving her unable to move even the slightest bit, as his low voice sounded by her ear. "How long are you going to keep avoiding me?" Mukai showed no fear as she turned back and looked straight into the deep eyes of the man before her. "We ended completely 3 years ago." Thuafong still refused to let go, tightening his grip even more, along with an overbearing declaration, "This relationship only ends when I agree to it. And right now, I have never allowed you to leave." That afternoon, the entire Lamb Corporation seemed to explode in shock when Thuafong personally appeared right in front of Ruo Kai's office. His face was as cold as ever, yet in his hands he held an enormous bouquet of vivid red roses. This startling scene left all the employees stunned as they gathered around, whispering in astonishment, unable to believe what they were seeing. Mukai was stunned, her face flushing red with embarrassment, so she immediately dragged him out of the work area to a quiet corner of the hallway and snapped, "Have you gone crazy?" Yet Thuafong remained completely calm as he looked at her and casually replied, "I'm not crazy. I simply want to officially pursue you again." Those words left Mukai utterly stunned. For a moment, she stammered before asking, "Who gave you permission to pursue me?" Thuafong simply curled his lips into a wicked, overbearing smile and asserted, "To pursue the woman I love. I absolutely don't need anyone's permission." In the quiet of the night, as a light drizzle gently veiled the deserted street, Mukai stood silently waiting for a ride, her slender shoulders trembling in the early chill. Suddenly, a thick, warm coat carrying Thuafong's familiar scent was gently draped over her shoulders, making her start and turn back. He stood right behind her, his gaze deep and filled with sorrow, softly reproaching, "You're still the same as before, forgetting to bring an umbrella every time it rains." Mukai could only lower her head in silence to hide the turmoil within her, but his voice sounded gentler than ever as he asked, "It's been 3 years. Do you really not remember anything about us?" That question made her heart tremble, as painful memories came rushing back, leaving her to choke out in return. "And even if I do remember, what would it change?" Thuafong stepped even closer, his breath brushing lightly against her forehead as he pressed, "Why are you still so determined not to come back to my side?" Mukai clenched her hands until they turned pale, bitterly admitting that she didn't want to endure that heart-wrenching pain ever again. That answer made Thuafong falter for a moment, a deep, unrelenting guilt weighing on him. In a low, earnest voice tinged with unease, he gently promised, "Then this time, Let me be the one to bear all the pain for you." At the meeting, a refined man suddenly appeared as a new partner. He smiled warmly at Wokai and greeted her, "Long time no see," instantly freezing the atmosphere. Thuafong's expression darkened at once, his gaze turning cold with jealousy as he witnessed the arrival of a stranger who seemed to share an ambiguous connection with the woman he loved. In his mind, only one question remained, filled with suspicion: who exactly is he? The mysterious man kept appearing by Nwokai's side, sometimes attentively driving her all the way home, other times generously inviting her out to dinner. What stood out was that she never once refused any of his gestures of care. Every one of those intimate moments fell into the sight of Thuafong, who was watching from afar. His gaze gradually darkened, filled with danger as jealousy surged within him. Clenching his teeth, he wondered whether she was deliberately growing close to another man just to provoke him. In the quiet hallway, Thuafong suddenly blocked Nwokai's path, his face filled with a chilling hostility. Through gritted teeth, he demanded to know who the man constantly by her side had been lately. In stark contrast to his agitation, Nwokai replied calmly, her tone laced with sarcasm, asking what it had to do with him. Jealousy flared as he grabbed her wrist tightly and pressed the question again, his voice edged with threat. This time, she met his gaze directly and declared without hesitation that the man was someone pursuing her. Her words left him frozen in place, the realization hitting hard he might truly be about to lose her. Thuafong suddenly pulled Nwokai hard against his chest in a domineering manner, his voice low as he demanded whether she really thought he would just stand by and let someone else take her away, facing that possessiveness. Nwokai merely frowned, her tone cold as she questioned what right he had to control her. Thuafong let out a faint, dangerous smirk and declared bluntly that he was acting on the right of a man who had never and would never let her go. His words pushed the tension between them to the breaking point. The next morning, right in front of everyone, Thuafong suddenly stepped forward and firmly grabbed Nwokai's hand in a domineering manner, ordering her to have a meal with him. Even as she struggled fiercely and demanded that he let go, he merely leaned down close to her face and stated in a low, resolute voice that he would never let go again. This open display of possessiveness threw the entire office into a tense, drama-filled atmosphere, leaving everyone around them stunned. In the late-night silence, with only the two of them present, Nwokai spoke softly, her voice quiet yet heavy with meaning, asking whether he truly thought his attempts to make amends now were enough. She brought up the painful memory from 3 years ago when he was the one who had cruelly abandoned her without a single explanation. Her words made Thuafong freeze completely, and for the first time in his life, he found himself unable to say anything in his own defense. The male lead was finally struck by the psychological blow, confronted with the immense pain he himself had inflicted on her. Thuafong took the initiative to find Nwokai and finally voiced a long overdue apology after years of separation. His words left her momentarily stunned before she coldly replied that everything was now far too late to start over. Even so, he remained resolute, looking straight into her eyes as he insisted that no matter the outcome, he had to say those words to face the mistakes of his past. The atmosphere between them sank into regret, weighed down by fractures far too deep to be mended by a single apology. Nwokai decisively turned her back, leaving behind a sorrowful declaration that an apology now could never erase the wounds of the past. Thuafong simply nodded, accepting that painful truth, yet a new determination ignited in his eyes. He quietly vowed to start everything over from zero, to prove the sincerity of his feelings. In that moment, as the male lead shed his arrogance and chose to pursue her again from the beginning, the atmosphere softened into something genuine and heartfelt. Faced with a sincere proposal for a stable and peaceful life from the man pursuing her, Nwokai remained silent, offering no clear answer. Even though reality presented her with a safe choice, deep within she couldn't stop herself from wavering. And that very silence betrayed how her thoughts kept drifting back to memories tied to someone else. The emotions reflected in her eyes revealed that her heart had never truly grown cold. In the middle of a sudden downpour, as Wook-hai stood there flustered for forgetting her umbrella, a shadow suddenly appeared above her. Thuafong had quietly come up behind her without her noticing. He didn't offer any grand promises or elaborate explanations, only silently handing her his only umbrella to shield her from the rain. That quiet act of care, speaking louder than 1,000 apologies, made Wook-hai's once frozen heart tremble intensely at the sincere change of the man who had once been so arrogant. Wook-hai gently lifted her gaze to look at Thuafong's tall figure beneath the cold rain and said that he really didn't need to treat her so well. Faced with her refusal, he only gave a soft, understanding smile and affirmed that it was something he genuinely wanted to do. That simple yet utterly sincere statement made her once hardened heart tremble for a brief moment, as his quiet persistence slowly began to melt the protective ice around her. Thuafong gazed deeply into Wook-hai's eyes and softly proposed starting everything over with complete sincerity. The air seemed to freeze in a few breathless seconds of silence, making his heart tighten with fear. At last, she chose to open up, letting out a meaningful remark that she would wait and see how far he could prove himself. Though her words still carried a hint of challenge, they were a clear sign that she was giving him a chance to make amends and continue the unfinished story of their love. In the empty hallway, the yellow lights stretched their shadows across the floor as Wook-hai stood still, her heart pounding so loudly she could almost hear every beat. Struggling to stay calm, she told him to stop following her. Thuafong didn't stop. Instead, he moved forward step by step, slow but unwavering, the distance between them gradually closing. She turned away to avoid his gaze and said she didn't want to go back anymore, her voice trying to sound cold but trembling slightly. He looked straight at her, his eyes deep and serious, and asked, "Or are you just afraid?" His words made her freeze, unable to take another step. She bit her lip, offering no reply, her wavering eyes betraying emotions she couldn't hide. He stepped closer, his voice lowering as he said, "You're afraid that if you go back, you'll get hurt again. Aren't you?" The air grew suffocatingly silent. She still said nothing, but her hand tightened into a fist. He let out a soft sigh and murmured, "This time, I won't let you face it alone." His voice wasn't loud, yet it was enough to throw her heart into turmoil. She stood there, unable to decide whether to move forward or step back. Wook-hai turned away, intending to leave to escape the surge of emotions rising within her, but her wrist was suddenly caught. The pull wasn't strong, yet it was enough to stop her in her tracks. Before she could react, she was gently pressed against the wall, the distance between them so close that they could feel each other's breath. Thuafong lowered his head and whispered her name, his deep voice impossible to ignore. He asked her to look at him, but she turned her face away, avoiding his gaze, her heart pounding wildly out of control. He reached out and lifted her chin, forcing her to face him. Their eyes met, tension thick in the air. He looked deeply into her eyes and said, "You say you don't want this, but your eyes say otherwise." His words stripped away all the emotions she had tried to hide. She trembled slightly, unable to maintain her composure. He continued, "You've never forgotten me, have you?" The firm statement left her stunned, the defenses in her heart slowly cracking. She couldn't deny it, nor could she turn away. Not giving her a chance to avoid him any longer, Thuafong lowered his head and kissed her. This time, the kiss wasn't rushed but slow and lingering, as if trying to reclaim everything that had been lost over the past 3 years. Wook-hai trembled softly, her hand unconsciously clutching his shirt as if searching for support. Time seemed to stand still in that moment, no words, only emotions, their breaths intertwining. A few seconds passed, yet it felt like an eternity. When he finally pulled away, his gaze remained fixed on her, unwilling to leave. He looked at her for a long moment before asking if she still wanted to say she didn't want this anymore, his voice low but gentler than before. Mukai flushed and turned away, her heart racing wildly, flustered and unsure how to respond. Yet she didn't push him away, nor did she keep her distance like before. Her silence was the clearest answer of all emotions long buried were beginning to resurface, stronger than ever. The next morning, the company was in an uproar as rumors spread rapidly, making the atmosphere noticeably different. In the crowded meeting room, all eyes were fixed on the front as Theo Fong walked in with neck high, showing no intention of avoiding attention. He held her hand right in front of everyone, gripping it tightly without letting go. Startled, Mukai softly told him to let go, her voice low but enough for him to hear. Without even looking at her, he calmly replied, "There's no need to hide anymore." His words silenced the entire room for a few seconds before whispers began to spread, curious, surprised, even shocked gazes turning their way. Mukai flushed but didn't pull her hand back. For the first time, she stood beside him without hiding, the feeling both unfamiliar and strangely familiar, yet making her heart race faster. Thua Fong stood tall, his eyes firm and resolute, as if telling everyone that she belonged to him. The meeting room door suddenly opened as a middle-aged woman stepped in, her powerful presence instantly silencing everyone. Her sharp gaze swept across the room before stopping on Mukai. In a low voice, Thua Fong said, "That's my mother," and the atmosphere immediately grew tense. Mukai froze for a brief moment, clearly feeling the pressure weighing down on her. The woman walked closer, her eyes opally assessing her from head to toe without the slightest concealment. Not a single detail escaped that scrutinizing gaze before she coldly stated, "You're not suitable for him." The simple words landed like a heavy blow. The entire room fell into absolute silence, no one daring to speak. Mukai clenched her hand, forcing herself to stay composed. She didn't step back, yet she didn't know how to respond either. In the long, quiet hallway, Mukai stood still, staring down at the floor, her thoughts in turmoil. She softly said that perhaps she should leave once again, her voice quiet yet clear, as if she had thought it through for a long time. Thua Fong immediately pulled her back, not allowing her to take another step. "No," he said, firm and without hesitation. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with inner conflict. Then she asked him to choose his family or her. The question made the air turn suffocatingly tense, everything seeming to pause as if waiting for his answer. Thua Fong didn't think, didn't hesitate. He tightened his grip on her hand and said, "You." Just one word, yet clear and powerful enough to make her freeze, her heart pounding as emotions surged beyond her control. Mukai sat across from Thea Fong's mother in a spacious room, yet the atmosphere felt heavy and oppressive. The woman's sharp gaze made the pressure unmistakable, but this time, Mukai didn't avoid it. She was asked whether she truly believed she was suitable to enter this family. The blunt question made her heart tighten slightly. She lowered her head for a few seconds, as if gathering her thoughts, then slowly looked up again, her eyes more resolute than before, and said that she knew she wasn't perfect and didn't come from a prestigious background. She added that she couldn't compare to others, but she would never leave him again. Her voice wasn't loud, yet every word was clear and firm. The room fell into silence. Thua Fong's mother looked at her for a long moment, her gaze no longer entirely cold as before. There was a faint hint of hesitation, but she still said nothing. Not long after, the company was hit by a major crisis. A critical project ran into serious trouble, throwing the entire system into chaos. Employees were panicking, and pressure from higher-ups kept mounting. Thua Fong was so busy he barely had time to rest. Seeing everything, Mukai decided to step in and help. She took the initiative to handle the most difficult tasks, working non-stop without a break. Documents piling up, her phone ringing non-stop. She ran everywhere searching for solutions, resolving each problem step by step. There were moments when it seemed beyond saving, but she never gave up. In the end, the project was successfully handled, and the company escaped the crisis. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. From a distance, Thuophong's mother had been watching the entire process, and her gaze gradually changed, no longer filled with doubt, but with recognition. One quiet evening after everything had settled, Thuophong's mother called Ngoc Hai to meet her. The tension from before was gone, yet it still made her a little nervous. The older woman looked at her for a moment before asking whether it was difficult being by his side. The unexpected question caught her slightly off guard, but she soon gave a soft smile and admitted that there were times she felt exhausted, times she wanted to give up. But she still wanted to stay with him. Her answer was simple, yet sincere, that no embellishment was needed. The room fell silent for a few seconds as Thuophong's mother let out a soft sigh, as if she had thought things through carefully, then said, "It's up to you two." Her voice was no longer cold, nor was it opposed. Ngoc Hai froze for a moment, a sense of relief and emotion spreading through her heart for the first time. She truly felt accepted. On the rooftop at night, a gentle breeze drifted by as the city lights stretched out in the distance, creating a peaceful scene. Ngoc Hai stood there, still unsure why Thuophong had brought her up here. He stepped in front of her, his gaze soft, no longer as cold as before, then suddenly knelt down and took out a ring that shimmered under the lights. She froze, her heart racing, unable to react in time. He looked at her and said that this time, it wasn't about starting over, but about going all the way to the end. His voice was low yet firm, each word engraving itself into her heart. Her eyes began to redden as emotion surged. He asked, "Will you say yes?" She let out a soft laugh through her tears, nodded, and said, "I will." He stood up and pulled her tightly into his embrace, bringing an end to all the misunderstandings and distance between them. And of course, such a happy ending wouldn't be complete without a passionate kiss to seal their love and bring their story to a perfect close. Thank you so much everyone for watching my video. I make everything by myself without a team. So if there's anything lacking, please leave a comment so I can improve and make better stories.